Dear God, Father in heaven, Father, we are grateful to be here before you this morning, grateful that, again, we have an easy opportunity to come to this house and worship you. Father, we are grateful for your word, which you give us. Again, it's everything we need to live the life we need to. Our prayer today, God, is in all the classes, everybody would benefit, everybody would learn more about you, and everybody would draw closer to you. We thank you for Jesus. It's in his name we pray. Amen. So today we're going to look at online streaming and social media and website. That's going to be what we're going to kind of talk about today. I do have one public service announcement. We still need a few more people for the food drive for Saturday. If you hadn't signed up, we need some people for registration and for greeters. But we're done, and we actually went over our number because we had some extra people, so that's good. We got microphones today. So I'm not going to say microphone every time, but if you got a question, raise your hand, because, again, we're trying to let people that's online be able to hear what's being said. So just raise your hand. But I do want to say this. Last week I noticed that once we started raising hands, the number of questions went down. So, you know, that microphone's not going to do anything to you. We're not going to put you up on the camera. All they're doing is just amplifying your voice. So just raise those hands if you got questions. All right, so before we start, we're going to talk about how they worshiped in the first century, right? And I used this first verse last week, but it's just so good it's showing us I got to use it again this week. So you can see here in Acts, day after day in the temple courts and from house to house, they never stopped teaching and proclaiming the good news that Jesus is the Messiah. And then in 13, later on, when they arrived at Salamis, they proclaimed the word of God in the Jewish synagogue. And John was with them as a helper. So, you know, that was real common, right? They're going to Jewish places of worship to talk about, you know, the good news. And, of course, they're doing it from house to house. At the very beginning, there's no churches. And, of course, there's other places they do it too, right? Public places and other public forums. But then look at Luke 5:1-3. And this was a day when Jesus was standing by the lake, and there were people gathered around and listening. And you can imagine, we know Jesus was not like Saul, head above everybody else, right? So just imagining people being all crowded up on him, and he's trying to teach, and maybe it's 30 people deep, you know, all around him. And so his voice is just not projecting, you know, if you got people right up in your face. And so he puts into the boat and goes out. You know, since God is the creator of science and physics and audiometrics, his voice now can project out to everybody. And I put that verse in there because we need to understand today, we have other tools. Jesus had very little tools. I mean, he, of course, knew we'd have an internet that one day and microphones and those kind of things, but he wasn't going to pull one out, right? So he had to go by what was happening then. And so very, you know, rudimentary tools and, you know, mostly face-to-face, small groups. Whereas today we have so much opportunity to spread the word in so many different ways and techniques. And that's what we're going to explore today. So we're going to talk about online streaming. And, you know, this is relatively new for a lot of churches, and we're going to see a number on that in a minute. But the big thing has been, and maybe many of you have said these things or thought these things, and I know leadership in churches has, but, you know, if we have online, does that make, you know, allow people to worship from home and not come to church? Isn't it way too convenient and comfortable to worship at home? And shouldn't we all be here? So all these kind of questions come up, right? And I can remember even having a conversation here with an elder from several years ago before the pandemic or maybe around the pandemic, talking about these kind of things, you know. And so there was a lot of mixed emotions about streaming because, you know, you felt like you needed to for those that were homebound, right? Because otherwise, what do they have if we don't stream? If you're homebound, what do you have for church? You got nothing from this church. You might watch some kind of televangelist, but you know, without that, so that's like, you know, needed for them. But it was almost looked on as a necessary evil, for lack of better words, right? We need it for the homebound people, but we don't want the masses to start going home and worshiping. And so, but we know after this class, you know, several weeks now, that there's generations coming behind my generation, X and Y, and they like the hybrid worship, which is defined as you'll come to church sometimes and you'll worship at home sometimes, not because you're sick or homebound, but just because you choose to. So we know there's going to be people out there. But I want to make one thing clear. So let's just read Hebrews 10:24. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. If you read this and you read the Bible, not in compartmentalized form, but in the totality, you see that when it talks about unity and fellowship and breaking of bread, it's meant for us to be together. And I'll say this to our online folks, and we're glad you're there, and we want you to keep coming online. But of course, our prayer and thoughts would be that you would someday join us here if you're have the physical capabilities to do so. So let's look at this number. Before the pandemic, about 1/4 of churches offered live streaming. We were one of them. Post-pandemic, basically 3 years later, I want you to grasp this, 3 years, because this data was late 2022, 92%. It's an anomaly, that you would go from 25% of the churches having it to 92, and I bet if you did it now, a year later, it'd be 95 or more, right? And we're not just talking about churches like this that have a lot of technology people in the congregation or big churches with a lot of money. When you start talking about 92 to 95%, you're getting those little country churches, right? Where a lot of the people, the most technology they got is learning how to post on Facebook. But what drove them, even these small churches, and you have to know that it encompasses that when you're talking about 92 or 95%, why did they stream? Why did they stream after 2019? Say again, who said that? Yeah. Necessity is the mother of all invention, right? And so you do what you have to do. And so people that wouldn't even consider this for the reasons I said a while ago did it because, at some point, if we can remember the pandemic, we didn't know how long it's going to go on. The first time it happened, it was like, oh, this is going to be gone in 3 weeks, if we just all stay inside. And it just drug on, and churches were out longer and longer. Joe, yeah.
Know for a fact, though, that something had come out of this that does not hurt. Looking at the Great Smoky Mountains Church of Christ, which I would go to a lot. Prior to COVID-19, they averaged 20,000 visitors a year on Sunday morning. Now they're doing well to get averaging 10,000. Now, yet the amount of traffic to the Smokies is up. There's over 14 million people a year that come to the Great Smoky Mountains. And we know from being up there that the crowd is now back up considerably. So we don't know where people are listening on TV because of the streaming, or are they just not because they're on vacation? They don't think they have to go to church. We don't know which of it is, but we know that there's been a tremendous drop. So that's the other side that we look at, which I know y'all do from here. There's always a few like it, but those places like that suffer considerably because of the streamlining.
When you said 20 online?
No, in person.
20,000?
A year, 20,000.
20,000 a year. Okay.
A year.
Okay. Yeah, I thought, I didn't know that congregation could hold 20,000.
But they're now averaging about 10,000 a year.
Yeah.
It's a big drop on it since of that, and it has not. It's just now slowly beginning to pick back up, right. And they're seeing this. I hope that people are getting away from the streaming and not coming at all.
Yeah. Well, we know from this class, right, that most churches don't have everybody back yet. So that amount may be surprising, but the fact that everybody's not back is not surprising. But that's a fantastic technological jump that would have never happened if, there hadn't been the pandemic. I mean, it would have continued to increase, but it surely wouldn't have went literally 75% almost in 3 years. That's pretty good. I mean, that's fantastic. So, our hope, and when you start talking about online, is that people that are watching us today, and again, I've said no hidden agenda here, is that people that are watching online and choosing to do that, again, we're not talking about homebound people. But that someday they'll be in here, right? They'll be in here with us. If you watch this long enough and you get to know the congregation, we're hoping that they'll be in the room with us. And so, and then the second thing is that we continue to see digital and real life blurs, right? In our own lives, we've seen that now, and that may not change ever or anytime soon. So again, if you think about your own life, when's the last time somebody here shopped in a store? Not a grocery store. You stopped this store? How? But do you do as much as you used to?
No.
She said yes. You're rare, because we quit. I hadn't been to the store in years, except for a grocery store. We shop everything online, and so do most people shop online? A majority of your stuff? Yeah, I see a lot of head shaking. So your life started changing to digital years ago. Your personal life and how you consume. Now, what about work? Who here has worked from home in the last 2 or 3 years? You can raise your hand. We won't bring the mic to you. Keep them up. Yeah, probably a large number of us, and so. That's another thing, right? Now, employers are trying to get people back in, but people still want to work from home. So these changes are not just happening in churches; they're happening in our lives and in a lot of things we do. So no surprises, it's happening here. So we're going to talk about 3 doors today: the front door, the side door, and the back door. The front door is, or it used to be, that door right there. When if you go back 20 years ago, people came in, the first time they came in, it's the first time they saw our church or us or anybody else. But where's the front door at now? Internet, right. If you see the date, they placed it somewhere in the 2010s, and I'll tell you, that's a good date. I'm not sure if it's 10 years ago or 15 years ago, but I've been asking visitors for years and years, and how did you find out about us? And it used to be, they moved here and somebody in their community said, I know this church in Fort Mill, or they drove by. But now it's been this way for years. It's the internet. 95% of the people, it's the internet. Yes.
I was just thinking, when you're working from home, like the last few years, one of the advantages of doing that is because you have Zoom or Skype and you can interact well with people that are in different locations. I think there's a little bit of a difference when you're talking about church services because there's no interaction with those in the building versus outside of the building. Just something to think about. Is there a way to better include those who have to be at home?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about that connection, or how it doesn't always translate. Online does not necessarily translate. And that's why long term or whatever, we want people in the building, right? That's the ultimate goal, is to be here with us. But since Matt brought that up, let's talk about that. So, from a worship standpoint, you could watch Keaton preach and hear all that. You could take the communion at home, right? You could sing as we sing. You could pray as we pray. But when you start talking about the fellowship afterward or before, or like tonight is service group night, we're going to do actual work for the church and community. And so that does not translate to online, right? You can't have that elbow, hands in the dirt kind of experience online. And so a lot of things won't translate. And that's why, again, as people watch, the hope and prayer is, and numbers are kind of showing this, nationwide, that those people after a while will choose to come in because, they want to be a bigger part of this. So anyway, that's the front door. The website's been the front door for years. There's nothing new about that. The pandemic didn't cause that. It might have expedited it in some places, but it didn't cause it.
One of the buzzwords today is having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. But nobody wants to have, I shouldn't say nobody, but a lot of people won't come to service and they have no personal relationship with their fellow members of the body of Christ. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really strange that people would rather do that, because how can you befriend people, know people, ask for help when you need help, if you never are there with them?
All right.
You're really just a stranger.
Yeah. And so that goes back to what I was saying. Some things just don't translate, right? And so to our visitors that are online, I'll say this. We're glad you're online. I wish I had 100 visitors. We average about 45 a week, but I wish we had 100. But our prayer is that they all eventually say the same things you're just saying, Keith. Wow, look at those people. They seem to love each other. They're doing things together. I want to be a part of that. And you can't be a full part of that till you really come in the building, especially in a very active church. So anyway, that front door moved years ago. It's never going to be right there again. But then there is a side door, and I want to talk about that one a little bit. And that side door is about the advantages of the online for members and visitors. So I want you to go back 30 years ago. And I want you to think about you're in a terrible car accident. Your back's broken. You laid up for 12 weeks. What did you do for church 30 years ago if you were laid up for 12 weeks? What was your options? I want to hear those. Did anybody have any options 30 years ago if they had to stay home for 12 weeks? No. So the internet offers some sensational advantages for things like this. Now, when you're laid up like that, people probably bought you food for the first couple of weeks and you got cards and calls, but again, 12 weeks is a long time. Those are going to dwindle, just people and the way we are. And so you had no way of staying connected unless somebody came by and told you. But today, if you're up, you can see all the services, right? But more than that, you can communicate with each other in social media and some of these things, right? You can keep up with the people that you love and know at church. So for members that may be, Chris is not here. Chris Carroll's had some surgery recently, and he's been viewing, and so he can see what's going on and communicate and those kind of things. And it's happened to probably many of us over the years. We were at home for a while for whatever reason. So it's a big side door. And if you're a visitor and you've been watching the sermons for a while, there's other things you can see online. Now, again, our Facebook page is private, but one of the things we've talked about for 24 is being more visible in the community via Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any other social media like that, being more of a public face to get people interested in coming here and hearing the word. So it's a big side door that offers some advantages that we just didn't have 30 years ago, which is a good thing, right? We already said the line blurs between digital and in-person. And again, the thing that's ironic in all this, including for myself, who's been doing basically evangelism type stuff for the church as a deacon or an elder since really about 2000, always saying, what can we do? What can we do to get more people? What can we do to get people to hear the word, And really the internet offers endless possibilities, and we don't embrace it like we should. Again, it's not the cure-all, end-all. It's a means to get somebody to come in to hear, and that's why we had to look at it. But it's an advantage, and we need to work it. And so for the one or two that might have left because of the internet, out the back door, how many might have come in the front door? The potential. Because, everybody sees us online first. Not everybody all at once. Do you think it's more coming in the front door than going out the back door? Oh yeah, the potential is much greater. So I'm going to give you an example why online does not keep. If we said today, we don't like online because people might leave, and we're going to figure a way to privately stream just to our shut-ins, would that keep people from leaving if they want to worship from home? No. What can you do? How many other churches of Christ around stream their services? Yeah. In fact, if you want to stream a service from the Church of Christ in the Mecca, Jerusalem of Churches of Christ, Tennessee, you can do that, right? You can stream from anywhere. It's not going to keep anybody from going. So instead of worrying about if we lose one or two, we need to worry about how many we can draw through that front door. Being better at getting the word out for online and social media and those kind of things, because it's a draw. And we have to face that. It's a draw for really every generation, but even more so for those that are coming up. So again, we've worried about these things for years, and we got one of the greatest tools in front of us. And it's not that we've done a bad job. It's just so much more we can do to make it more effective. And we're going to talk about some of those things in a minute. So I want to hear comments on this. Do you agree with this? Disagree with it regarding online streaming and its impact on in live attendance like today? We have a hand. We'll keep your hand up. We'll get to you.
Just to kind of point to the efficacy of what you're talking about, since I've been here, I don't know that I have met a single visitor that has not said some version of, I already know you because I've watched a sermon or watched a service online. I mean, that is the overwhelming. I I caution a guess of upwards of 95% of everybody that I talk to, and I think you get similar experience. People,
Yes.
when they come in the door, hey, where you from? How you doing? It's always, hey, we're down the road. We watched a couple services the last 2 weeks and then decided to come in person. And like I said, that's not everyone's story, but that seems to be the overwhelming majority. We might lose, like I said, 1 or 2, but I bet we're gaining 3 to 1, maybe even more, 5 to 1.
The potential much more than that.
Yeah, but it, in realistic what we're seeing, it's an incredible opportunity.
Okay. We had other hands.
Scripture tells us to teach, to plant the seed.
Right.
God gives the increase. This is a tool to plant the seed. He also uses the analogy to be fishers of men. This is an opportunity to use a different form of bait to draw it in. So that's the analogy I use.
Right.
I mean, it's a tool.
It's a tool. That's exactly right. To get people in here.
This in no way can take the place online of what our job is.
No.
To save people, we've got to get out and we've got to talk to them. We've got to deal with it. Like one of the things you had a few weeks ago I saw was how many of some age group wanted to be in a church building if they were going to be involved. We need to reach those people. I think I told you this that day then. Some way we got to reach those people. Online's not going to get those people just because they see it online. They got to be touched, and that's the main way. And for 70 years or whatever I've been fooling the church on there, that's the main way you bring people in. We're not going to get them at any great speed any other way than us do our job as Christ tells us to.
Yeah. Well, and I think, a step further is personal evangelism is always probably going to be the number one way, right? Because it requires some trust. It requires a connection. It requires those kind of things. But what the internet does is maybe get them into the building so we can meet them and talk to them and go from there. Any more questions or comments?
Using it as a tool. We had a couple that we knew, and the husband was in the service and fighting overseas, and he would watch the service online, and all the soldiers that were with him in that unit would watch with him. You don't know who else is watching
Right.
that's going to be influenced or touched. It doesn't take away from having to reach out to them, but it may reach them to ask questions and to seek, maybe not this church, but another church in the area where they live.
Right. More? Okay. Let's see what we got next. We're going to talk about social media now, unless there's any more questions about this. But I think that, the overall thing is this is a positive. We need to get better at it, being online. That's part of social media, too. So I said earlier, or maybe I said last week, we're going to put a team together and revamp the website in January. It'll be 8 years old in 24, which is pretty archaic. And so I'm not going to have an exhaustive list of things that we're going to do for social media or the website, because literally we're going to put a cross-section, a team together to look at the works in the church and what we need, and then, some technological things like is it more user-friendly for the people that's having to admin it and that kind of stuff. You won't hear, oh, this is exactly what we're going to do going forward. No, you're not going to hear that here today. But I want to talk about that first point before we start talking about social media. It's a really good point, because people, when they come in the door or when they go online the first time, they're not going online or coming in that front door thinking, this is going to be a bummer. I don't really want to do this. It's just like when you go to a new restaurant. Do you go expecting it to be a failure? I hope you don't. You go hoping it'll be a good experience for you and your family and someplace you can go back to. These people are no different when they come. When visitors come in, they're wanting us to meet their need, whatever it is might be. We talked about the kind of visitors a few weeks ago, and most of them, a majority of the 6 are somewhere around some kind of need, right? So they want that. So, when they walk through, it's kind of hopefully a clean slate, and we got a chance, right, to get them to come back. Okay, one of the things that more and more of the leading churches are talking about is providing transformation over transaction, and we're going to talk about that. Transaction being the visitor comes in, he gets greeted, he gets a bulletin, several people shake their hands and say hello, and then comes in, here's a sermon. When you go out, they get visited again. You know, it's kind of checking the boxes. But what most people are looking for today is something transformational, meaning they got a need. You know, and that's been, you've heard me say this over the last couple of weeks. Most people come in that door have a need, right? They've moved from another city. Their church might have been fantastic in the other city, but they're not there. So they have a need to find a new church. Or, I think we had an example, someone's spouse died after 45 years of marriage or something, and they had a need, and it was, you know, they were grief-stricken, right? And so, or somebody that's not satisfied with their current church, and they come in. So we've got to understand how to meet needs just like Jesus did when he was teaching. He met a lot of needs when he was teaching, right? It was a big, I'm going to say a draw, but that's just part of what happened. So, you know, when you start thinking about social media, it's more about, you know, putting stuff in it. And again, we're not good at this right now. Anybody, Keaton, you disagree with that? We're not good at social media right now. There's so much more we can do. We have very little presence. And you know, when we start trying to work on this, it won't be like it just goes from, mediocre to boom. It's a lot of work. In fact, companies spend millions of dollars keeping content in their websites and social media fresh. It's you know, have you ever been to a site, maybe not a big company, but a mom and pop business or a restaurant, and you said, hey, we want to go to that restaurant. Let's go to their website, and it says, I just got back from the beach, so I'm going to use this, fried flounder, $14.99. Well, you go to the restaurant, and it's $17.99. Well, we hadn't updated the website. You know, when you go to websites and they never get updated, you quit going to them. So when we start doing things like this, we have to be up on our game and keep the content pretty fresh. But it's not just about any content. It's about, again, meeting needs. And there's ways to do that. And so I'm going to give you an example in a minute, but there's ways to show that you want to meet needs of people in the community so that they have a reason to come. Now, that takes a lot of work and a lot of thought, but I'm going to give you that example of the guy that lost his wife for 45 years. Let's just say that guy came here and visited, and he came in and said he got all the good greeting, all that went good, and then we're doing the announcements, and we cover 17 things we're doing between now and Christmas. Does that matter to that man that's grief-stricken? Is that going to make him feel better about coming here? All the things that we're doing. No, it's not. You know, he's got a need. And it's not the fact that we've got all these events going on and we're a good church and we're working hard. There's nothing wrong with any of that, but it's not meeting his needs, right? Because he's probably sitting there half the sermon thinking about the wife he's lost of 40-some years. So then you have to think about, and there's always somebody with needs, right? There's always people with needs. We have needs in our lives. Things don't go well. So I want to give you just one example of the kind of thing we're going to do. Someone came to me, congregation, a few months ago and said, hey, I attended a grief workshop. It was like a 13-week class, and it was very helpful to me. And she gave me the book. And in our elders preachers meeting, a little bit after that, Keaton, one of the things he wanted to do for 24 was do a grief workshop. He knows a speaker that kind of specializes in this. So out of that, this is our tentative plans, nothing solid. Somewhere in May of 24 or somewhere around that, I think is what we said for the date. We would do that workshop. It'll be a one-day workshop here, and then we'll have that class. You know, with the hopes that people from the community that are grieving will come to this class, you know. And so that's the kind of things where you can actually do something that's biblical, and you can still help meet needs, you know, of people. And I'm sure there's plenty more things we could think of, but that's just an example of what I'm talking about. Comments?
I'm kind of old-fashioned. Jesus helped people, and then he shared some truth with them as well, sometimes vice versa. My barber had a problem with her heart. I got her hooked up with a doctor, and she says, I owe you. I said, how about a Bible study? Went and shared some gospel with her, and last night she set me up with 11 people to have a Bible study with. I had to do the cooking, and she brought some things as well. 4 of them showed up because the other family, the father had passed away. But she's like a female evangelist, kind of like Mary here. And she's lining people up for me. She really has spoken to 13 people. And she's good at talking to them. She's a barber. She gets them that way. She gets them in a neighborhood, in an apartment. To me, we just have to look and see what people need. And I hooked up, 5 of those people, I hooked up with the Charlotte Avenue Church. They needed some help for a few weeks. Charlotte Avenue got involved with them, and so Sherry says, why don't you come visit the church? Sure, I want to visit the church that helped me. That tells us a lot of things. We see people around us that have needs. We need to take advantage of pantries and things like that. It just so happens all these people live over near where I live in Rock Hill, but you can sense people's needs every day. As a church, as an individual, we can help them. We have to open up our own pocketbooks too. Sherry bought 4 Bibles for these people. It's just down to earth. That social media is you talking to somebody and advertising the truth. That's my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt you made a valid point. You know, this is just another tool, like I say, to meet people in a broad space. You know, you're affecting lots of people, not just 1 or 2. But like I said, it'll never take the place of personal evangelism. That's just what this was built for. The gospel was built for personal evangelism, and nothing will replace that. So, any more comments? That's the kind of things we would look at. Like I said, don't have an exhaustive list. It's something we'll have to think about, how we can meet the needs of folks.
Gilbert, you hit on a very sound point in our regards. Where we came from, we had a program called Healing Hearts Ministry. And once a quarter, we would do a outreach program. And what the program was an advertisement that went out to the community, posting on the internet, and it would deal with things such as struggles in marriage, alcoholism, narcotics, suicide, loneliness, depression. And every quarter we would have guest speakers come in, and we'd do a program, but we did it on Sunday after our worship service. So we invited them to come to worship and then to stay for the program. So that's kind of an outreach which is very successful for us.
See why with the topics that y'all were covering. So that's you're right. That's ideas that can be applied to this. You know, our food drive is something that we've been doing a long time. It's similar to this, right? We reach out to people in need, and they come, and we've actually, as you know, had baptisms from that. And so that's the kind of things we want to do going forward to reach some people. So it's not about popularity, right? If you post pictures of your grandkids or a vacation, we all like to get those likes, right? But this is not about that, because likes are fine, but we're not looking for them for the church. That doesn't really build a connection. We're looking for something much deeper. And so it's like I say, it's never going to be about, oh, well, let's show these 17 items I just talked about that we're doing between October and December. We might do some of them, but just to list them is not a lot of value. We need to connect them some way to add value. Now, some of them may, like the food drive or the Veterans Day we just did. I think that certainly meets some needs of honoring people, and that's a need too, right? Especially when somebody served your country. So if you start thinking about these kind of things, we have to figure out ways to broaden our approach with them in some cases, doing some of the stuff we're already doing. But, you know, I saw the pictures of that. I didn't get to attend that, but I know that it looked like me several visitors, but what if we could have 50 visitors in that Veterans Day thing yesterday? You know, it's a good event that we have. And so it's finding ways to, without just saying, oh, well, we're having a Veterans Day, you know, saying something about it that we can get more folks in. And again, it's not about building an audience and not about that. It's trying to build a connection. So I want to go to this last part here. I like this a lot. I wish I authored this, but I didn't. But, you know, there's lots of ways you can put stuff in an internet or social media situation. Is that my mic doing that all the time? making that? Okay, sorry about that. I'll try. I can't hold still, so I'm not going to promise that. It's not about listing stuff, like I said, but it's, one of the things that a lot of the leading edge churches recommend is using stories. Now, who else used stories to teach? Jesus. Parable's a story, right? Who else? Somebody said something over here. Anyway, Jesus did, right? And why are stories sometimes a better way to get something across? So let's just look at Jesus for a minute. The Bible in the Old Testament said, do not kill, do not murder, do not covet your wife. But did Jesus teach that way? No, he taught with a story. Why would he teach with a story? It does. That's a key point. And it also often resonates more with people, right? So I'm going to use an example, and I hope this is not a terrible example because I don't mean it that way. But let's just talk about 9/11. And we could say on social media, we're so sorry that I think it was 30-some hundred people lost their lives in 2001, 9/11. And that would elicit some responses. But if you told a story about two people, maybe a husband and wife that went to work that morning, you told about their lives, and maybe what may or may not have happened to them, that would resonate with people more, into the point of maybe having a lump in your throat and that kind of stuff. And I'm not trying to play off people's emotions, but stories just add a different dynamic to saying, well, we need to do this and we need to do that. It teaches in a way, even when David was confronted by the angel used the story, right, to show him he took that man's last sheep. He just didn't say you did it. He let David come to their own realization by telling the story. So stories are very powerful. And so that's something that we can look at and do. And we have a lot of stories in our congregation, right? A lot of stories that are biblical in nature and would help people. Yes.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks for bringing that up, Gilbert. We had 40-plus visitors yesterday at the Veterans Day breakfast, and we used that technique. We had 3 veterans who shared their stories, Matt Ibbotson and Harry and Charles Baker. And a part of those stories was how they found Christ, where they were at in the Army, or how God has led them through their experiences in the military. And I think those were some of the most powerful parts of our event.
That's just some things to think about. Not necessarily giving, I don't like the word testimony. I think it's just not a word I like to use, but, using a story to get a point across and get biblical teachings across, it can be very useful. Any more comments or questions? This side over here and ask a question today. Y'all got a glass wall up over here or all mic afraid? What is micophobia? No questions on this side. Okay, I'm going to be watching y'all.
I think part of what we have to think about also is the terminology that we use. Mm-hmm. We say, are people coming to church? And for me, I've gotten out of the habit and asking people, are you coming to worship? We are the church. And so when we watch programs like this many times, that people are at home and they won't come to church, we are the church. Maybe the church should go to them also as individuals and meet with them and find out what their needs are. And we don't know the reason that they're not here, but I think it goes back to terminology. If we started using worship, I'm going to worship. Worship is for the children of God as we worship God. Worship is also service, is how we service other people. And so we as the church should be getting out of this building to worship God through service to other people.
Okay. I think actually that's a good point, for people that may have been attending our online services for a while. We could certainly have to check with them, but visiting would certainly be something that would be okay. As long as they're willing. Okay, we're going to talk about the website. Again, I don't have details for you, right? Because that's just not decided yet. But just look at point number 4. I don't know why that's hard to see. But one of the things we don't have is we don't have, when you start talking about your splash page, that's the page you hit when you go to a website. And sometimes they're super busy. I've seen them with 11 or 12 clickers at the top, from about to leadership to whatever, a bunch of stuff, and I'm not taking away from any of that, but one of the things that we will do is add a click on the front page for visitors. So, because visitors have a little bit different need or view site than we do as members, right? And so they may still, at the end, dwelling down, get to the sermons. We would definitely want them to see that, just like you all could, dwelling down, get to the sermons. But we might have stuff on there, like I said last week, we'd probably have something about what to wear so people are not caught unexpected, where to park, where to go once you arrive. In fact, the next slide's got a bunch of stuff on there that they recommend. And, we know the schedule. We have all that, and directions with a navigation interface so you don't, you never have to. I'm pretty sure we have that now, right, on our website. Can somebody verify that? We have that, the navigation interface on our website. Dress code, a picture of the preacher. What do y'all think about that? I don't know. So I started looking at some pictures of the preacher just in case we want to do this. And I decided that wasn't a good idea. Yeah, they might. There's crazies out there. Stuff about the parking, right? These signs are going to go up for we're going to have parking out there, where to park. We have limited mobility. We have senior parking. And the youth, again, you won't see more important thing to Christians who have children than the youth program. It's just so important. General overview, and it could be many more things, but that would be kind of things you'd go to that and it'd be different than you'd go to for the members. But we have to embrace digital marketing, right? So if you go back to 2000, we used to use yellow page ads, right? We paid a lot of money for yellow page ads. Yeah, well, what did you have back then? You had to. We paid money for newspaper ads. I used to put a picture of Jeff Trotter in one of his little mini sermons in the Fort Mill Times once a month at least. And we did billboards even one time because Joe's sitting over. I'm going to give the elders credit at the time. They never said no to me to anything I wanted to try when I was evangelism deacon, even the billboards, and they were super expensive back in 2000, whenever we wanted one or two. We weren't well known then, and I don't know if anybody ever came in, but we did all kinds of stuff, right? Well, we have to do the same thing today with digital, right? And here's just some lists of some things. Again, the one I like best on there is the email newsletter, because we do have email addresses of people. And we could send something to them and then have an easy opt-out, though, because we don't want to aggravate people, because I know I don't like getting the political stuff every single day, 4 times a day. And then they replicate texts, and there's something about a free business Google profile and Zoom and digital ads. We've used some digital ads here. This is like the last thing I covered. Digital ads can be very focused, and they're cheaper, than print. Like, for instance, Heart to Heart, House to House, very expensive. Direct mailers are very expensive because we have, in 29708 and 29715, about 150,000 people now. And then if you go 20 or 30 miles out from the church, we got close to 500,000 people that we could draw to. So, it's about putting certain keywords in our church, because the dream here is that when you type in anywhere in North South Carolina, local, and you type in Church of Christ, instead of getting somebody else's name, you see Church of Christ at Gold Hill Road. And there's ways to do that or make that more likely to happen. You come up in the top 3 when somebody does that. I'm not going to talk about content curation because we're out of time. We'll talk about that next week. So any last comments or questions before we close? Okay, thank you.